You just found Mind Your Business, the real estate podcast, where I put the real back into real estate. I'm Janis Benstock. I've been an agent, a broker, an instructor, and now I also own my own real estate school where I teach students not only how to get their license, but to succeed in the business. And I started this podcast so that I could say even the quiet things out loud. I'm not afraid to tell it like it is. And if you're a new agent or an aspiring agent or someone who even needs a reset, you have found your place. Pull up a seat, put whatever you want in that sippy cup, and join me for a wild ride.
Do I have to be salesy in order to be in real estate? I get this question all the time, and I'm probably going to be, people are going to fight me on this, but I'm up for it. And the answer is no, you don't have to be salesy. First of all, what the hell does salesy mean? Because I have a big problem with that term. In common terms, like people think that salesy means you have to be pushy. You have to get someone to buy the thing that you're trying to sell. And if that's how you look at sales, then yeah, I suppose you need to be salesy in order to sell real estate, but I think that's pretty gross. Nobody wants to be sold to, especially when it comes to real estate, because real estate is the most expensive transaction in almost everyone's life. Like, it's hard to spend more money on something than a house, and it's also complicated. That's why you have to sit in real estate class for all of those hours in order to get your license, because it's complicated. The other thing about real estate is that there was a questionnaire done. People were surveyed about the most traumatic experience of their life, and the top 3 answers were death, divorce, and moving. Duh, we're helping people with the 3rd most traumatic experience of their life, and it's often coupled with death or divorce. So it's emotional. So if we're approaching sales as trying to get someone to do something, they're gonna feel it, and it's gonna be ick, because nobody wants to be sold to. But if you look at real estate the way that I do, and you realize it's about people, it's not about houses, and it's not about closing deals, it's about relationships, and you focus instead on serving people, on problem solving, then you don't have to be salesy. Then what you have to do is you have to genuinely care about people. You have to know your product, which is real estate, and probably the house that you're showing. And you have to be able to ask questions and then do the magic of listening so that you can figure out how you're going to solve these people's problems. So, for example, when you start talking to someone, my favorite example is at an open house. I've been to open houses, and I actually have my students go on an assignment where they go on a field trip, and they have to go to open houses. My students have to go to open houses, and they have to come back and report to the class how the experience was for them. And so many times they come back and they tell me that either the agent at the open house ignored them and did nothing, or started word vomiting about the property, pointing out, here's the kitchen, here's the bathroom, all the things that are obvious. But it is very uncommon that the agent at the open house actually stopped to ask questions about the human being that was standing right in front of them. And the key to sales, the key to success, the key to a meaningful and joyful life in real estate and everywhere is connecting with other humans. And so if someone comes into your open house, for example, and you're spewing word vomiting about the property and trying to tell them everything great about the property, and they don't like the property, because what are the chances that they are, right? It might not be perfect for them. If they don't like the property, then the relationship is dead. There's nowhere to go from there because there was no connection made. But if you approach an open house instead of, I gotta sell this house, if you approach it instead from a place of, this is a chance to meet and connect with other humans, then when the person standing in front of you is there living and breathing, you can look at them and you can say, hi, I'm Janis, how are you? What's your name? Yeah, what are you doing? And you start asking them questions about themselves, not in a creepy, pushy way. You have to take cues from what they're saying, and you have to follow along the conversation at their level of comfort. There's some bit of reading into other humans, but you start to have a conversation with them, and instead of shining the spotlight on yourself or on the property and word vomiting about how great you are or how great the property is, shine the spotlight on them instead and ask them questions, because You don't know anything about this person standing in front of you, and it's your opportunity to make a connection. So people love to talk about themselves, and not in an ego way, but they just love it. And instead of shining the spotlight on yourself, shine the spotlight on that person. Have you ever done internet dating? All right, a lot of us have. Imagine, and follow me on this one, imagine that you're getting ready to go out on a date with someone, and this person on the app seemed like the perfect person. On paper, they were everything that you were looking for. And you get to dinner with high expectations, high hopes, and you sit down, and all of a sudden they start talking about themselves ad nauseum, and they don't stop. And you're just sitting there eating your food, inwardly rolling your eyes, waiting for them to take a breath so that you can say, oh, it's time to go, I want to get out of here, because you're so bored. Whereas you could go out on a date with somebody else. Now you go on a date with somebody else, and on the app they seemed okay, but there was just something about them that intrigued you, but you don't have high hopes for the date, but you go anyway. You sit down at the date, and they ask a question about you, and then they're like this. And they start looking into your eyes, and they put their fork down, and they just listen. And it seems like 5 minutes go by, but it's 2 hours. And you talked all about yourself, and they ask questions, and they listen, and by the end of it, by 10 minutes in, you're in love with this person. Why? Because they connected with you, and they asked questions about you, and they shine the spotlight on you. They made you feel special. And now your dinner's cold, and you're just sitting there. They're staring at you, and it's love, right? That's the whole thing about building relationships. And I'm not saying fake it and pretend to be interested in someone, but people are really interesting. They're really interesting. And if you approach the conversation trying to get something out of it, like a sale, or like them to sign up with you as a buyer, you're going to choke, and you're going to get really weird, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're not going to be able to do it, or you're going to sound like you're using a script. But if instead you get your head on straight, and you look at that human in front of you, and you think to yourself, this is an opportunity for me to connect with another human being. They're either going to buy the house, or they're not going to buy the house, because spoiler alert, we don't sell the house sells itself. They're either going to buy it, or they're not going to buy it. And if you take the pressure off of yourself, and instead of looking at them as a dollar sign, you look at them as a living, breathing human being with all kinds of cool stories and information that you never heard before, now you're not going to feel weird, and you're genuinely going to be interested. And I promise you that you are going to create tons of meaningful relationships, whether it's one that lasts for 5 minutes, or whether it lasts for 5 years, whether it results in a transaction or not. But you're going to get a lot more comfortable at talking to people when you don't have an agenda in mind, rather than to connect with a human being. There's a organization, a national organization called The Moth, and they have a local branch in Philadelphia, and they have them all over the country. And what The Moth does is they hold usually monthly storytelling sessions, and they're really cool. If you've never been there, you should check it out. But here's what they do. People come and they sit in the audience. Usually there's food and alcohol. It's at some cool kind of venue. And people that choose to volunteer to tell a story put their name in a hat, and 10 people get drawn out of the hat to go up and tell their story. And they have 5 minutes, and there's a theme of the month, and they get up and they just talk. And I have been to the Moth a few times, and I'm going to tell you, it is one of the coolest experiences ever. And do you know why? Because you walk into the room, and you get there early, and you're sitting around with all these strangers sitting in the room, and they all look different, and they're all keeping to themselves. And then all of a sudden, 10 random people come up one after the other and start telling their stories. And when they tell their story, all the preconceived notions that you had about them, and you do, because we all do, every single time we see a person, we sum them up and we make unconscious decisions and bias about them. All of these preconceived notions that you had fall away, and you realize there's a person inside there that has a really freaking cool story to tell that you probably never in a million years would have guessed about them. And it is such an incredible connecting experience between you and humanity to just realize that everyone is much more than they look, than they appear on the outside. And if you approach an open house or any conversation with any human from that angle, from that perspective, whether it's in business or pleasure, you're gonna find, I promise you, that your life feels more fulfilling, that your relationships feel more fulfilling, and there will be real estate transactions that result from that. Now, this is not saying this is the only way for you to build your business. There are tons of things that you should do to build your business, depending on what feels right to you. But even if you just do this one thing, and yeah, you have to get out of the house a little bit, or get on Zooms, or get on calls, or talk to people, because if you don't leave the house and you sit around behind your Facebook on sweatpants all day, it's not gonna work. But if you get out and you talk to people, and you are genuinely interested in what they have to say and who they are as a human, you will find that you can connect on some level, with almost every single human being that you come across in your day-to-day life. And then when you introduce real estate into the conversation, automatically some of those are going to turn into clients and turn into transactions. So do you need to have a sales personality? Well, you tell me, because what does sales mean to you? If you like human beings and you're just genuinely interested in them, and you want to connect with them, and you want to serve them, and you want to get paid, you could be really good at real estate. So to be genuinely interested in people, I'm going to tell you about a giant fail when I was out showing a property. One of my clients was out looking for a house for her elderly parents who happened to be in wheelchairs. And so we were at this property, and the listing agent was showing us around, which doesn't normally happen, but sometimes it does. And she was showing us the property. So we're walking through the property, and my client instantly can tell whether or not this property is for her, because she has to modify it for wheelchairs. And she doesn't want to say anything because she likes to keep her personal life personal. She doesn't want to say anything to the agents. We're just walking through, and the agent starts going on, here's the kitchen, and my client's rolling her eyes because the refrigerator gave it away. Here's the bathroom, again, the toilet gave it away. And then she starts going through and pointing out all of these amazing features, like the heated floors. And my client just looked at me, because we would have known in 30 seconds that that property wasn't for her, because she couldn't modify for wheelchairs. But this agent never even stopped to ask what my client was looking for, and instead just went on with her script and lost us. Now, I was already with my client, so that agent had no chance of getting her as a client, but she still didn't put anything about the client first. All she did was talk about the property. And I can guarantee you that if she does that with my client, she does that with her own clients. And that is completely missing the point. Did you ever see the movie The Wolf of Wall Street? There's the scene in there where they say, buy this pen. And they pick up a pen, and everyone gets up to try and sell the pen as best as they can. And they start talking about the amazing ink and how wonderful the pen is and how great it is. I just thought of the story. So they're like, okay, buy this pen. And they start talking about the pen and how it's got such great ink, and it has this little clip that you can put into your pocket. And they're trying to go about and use their sales skills to sell this pen. That's your typical salesperson, your stereotypical salesperson. But here's what I say. If you give me this pen and tell me to sell it to someone, how the hell can I sell this to someone when I don't know the basic need that they have? Because maybe they don't need to write something. Maybe they have an itch in their ear. Or maybe they have to scratch something over here. And if I ask them first, what do you need, by having a conversation with them, now I might realize that I have the magic answer to solve their problem, and I can sell them this pen. This is how we approach our business. So many people tell us to sell this pen, to use a script, and to try and get people to overcome objections by leading them down the path and saying what you need to say to get them to close a deal. But you're missing the point. They're not deals, they're not dollar signs, they're humans. And nobody wants to be sold to. How many times do you walk past a store and you want to go in, but you know that they're going to be vultures, and you just want to look around and dream and think, and if you're left to your own devices, you might buy something, but there's too much pressure, and so you don't even go? Do we need to be like that, or do we need to change the game? Maybe it's time to start approaching people from a human relationship standpoint instead of a dollar sign. And maybe they won't be so freaked out to work with you. Maybe they'll look and think, this is a really cool person that I get along with, and I have real estate needs that they can help. And maybe you'll also make friends. I often say that sales is service, sales is problem solving. And for agents in my brokerage, I tell them this when they sign on. My job as a broker is to give you all the tools you need, and you just put them in your tool belt, and I'll show you how to use them. And then when it comes time to help someone, all you have to do is say, is it ethical? And if the answer is yes, then you ask, is it legal? And if the answer is yes, then you can take those tools out of your tool belt to solve someone's problem. And sometimes someone's problem isn't even a real estate transaction. It could be the seller calls you because they want to list their house. And when you go sit down with them and you start asking them questions and seeing tears in their eyes, you realize that the reason that they called you to sell their house is because the roof is leaking and they don't have the money to fix it, and the only solution they can think of is to sell the house. And then you reach into your tool belt because you're human and you connected with that person, and you know that there's a home equity improvement loan that people can get no matter what their income is, or no matter what their LTV is, no matter how much equity they have in their house, and you tell them about this program, and then they apply for it, and then they get it, and they fix the roof, and they keep their house. And guess what you got? You didn't get a listing, but you made a human connection, and you helped someone. But you didn't close a deal. So Janis, that's not selling, that's not selling, that's not real estate. And I call bullshit, it absolutely is. Because when you think of real estate as houses, when you think of real estate as commissions, it's not real estate. But when you think of real estate as relationships, guess what? You just won the lottery. And I promise you that that seller somewhere down the line is gonna refer you or come back to you, and the business will follow. When you're led by something greater than the money will follow. And sales comes with a bad rap because there are so many people out there that are pushy, selling with commission breath. So do you need to be a salesperson in order to succeed in real estate? No, you need to be a human problem solver and put relationships first. And I promise you, the deals and the money will follow. Thanks for hanging out with me on my first episode of the Mind Your Business podcast. If you liked this conversation, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you want to see how we can work together, just check the link in my comments. I'll see you next week.